Welcome to the Next Class 2.0 with host Rob Birdsell, Kent Hickey, and Aaron Barisano. Join us as we discuss the latest trends and innovations shaping education.
Hello, Kent. Welcome to the Next Class.
Hello, Rob. How are you doing?
Good. This is a new format for us, doing a little pre-meet, a little preview of the podcast. How are things in Gig Harbor first, though?
They're just fine. Beautiful day here today, and actually, it's good soccer weather as I look out there right now. So,
and we're going to get a lot of soccer coming up today. We also in Chicago have been last Thursday. We hit 64 degrees at the beach, not inland, at the beach. Met two guys down there. Didn't think to bring my sunscreen. Got a little sunburned.
I noticed that, Rob. I didn't want to say
in February.
So yeah. I think it's called a wind burn, Rob, but that's okay.
That could have been the walk this afternoon. We had the wind was blowing hard right before I came in here. So Kent, today we have a really interesting guest. Fabrice Gautrat is the head coach of the women's professional soccer team in Houston, the Houston Dash. Interesting. He's married to Morgan Bryan, longtime U.S. national team player from Orlando player, and now playing in Europe, in England, I believe. Fabrice coached my youngest daughter, and I was counting it up when I was preparing for this. We had over 30 years of youth soccer coaching between our three kids, a lot of different coaches, and I could only think of 2 or 3 bad coaches. We had some really good coaches, but I will put Fabrice up in the top 2, if not the top 1.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what he has to say about leadership qualities. And what I was thinking about actually when I was walking our dog this morning was here in the Seattle area. I think the 3 best coaches that I got to know over the years, John Hamill, Peter Fewing, and Brian Schmetzer. And Brian Schmetzer is actually the coach of the Sounders, right? The men's team here. But when I was thinking about their leadership, is that they must know a lot about soccer. That's what they do in their lives. But I just was struck by, they're just such good people. They're humble, they're thoughtful, they're humorous. But the key is they really care for kids. They meet kids where they're at. And I'm really looking forward to talking to Fabrice, because given what you've said about him, my guess is that he's going to be someone who does that, right? That really is person-centered, not results-centered, even though he lives very much in a results environment, right? So I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Well, let's welcome Fabrice in here, and we'll see you at the back of the show. Hello, and welcome to the Next Class. I'm Rob Birdsell, your host, joined by one of my co-hosts, Kent Hickey. Kent, good to see you.
Good to see you, Rob. Hello.
And we have a special guest, Fabrice Gautrat from the Houston Dash. Fabrice, welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate you having me. Looking forward to diving into all things leadership.
That's great. And for our listeners, Fabrice and I have known each other, I think Caroline and I just did the math, 7 years, I believe.
Wow.
He was the coach of my daughter during an important period of her looking to play in college, and really, I feel helped her land in an amazing spot. So a lot of time traveling with Fabrice all around the country. And but Fabrice, let's jump into this here. In researching this, I learned stuff about you that I didn't know. That I believe your father is French and your mother is Brazilian. Which, again, having known you for 7 years, I didn't know that. You'd think with your name, I kind of figured the French piece out. But how did their backgrounds influence not only your soccer, but more importantly, what you're doing now, your coaching, your leadership?
Yeah, so they met and had me in Southern California, so another small melting pot. And so I grew up playing on a lot of Hispanic teams too. And I remember early on, my mom was worked for an airline company, Brazilian. So she would send me to Brazil like by myself at like 5, 6 years old. So like from an early age, or France, like she'd be like, "Hey, you're going off for like a month." So from an early age, I just learned to just connect with people from very different cultures. So I think the mix of them, but also my upbringing, I think also being an only child, I was always pushed to be around other people, like, cause you're by yourself. So you're like, whether it's neighborhood kids or, going with family in Brazil or France. So yeah, from a young age, just connecting with people was just part of my DNA. So.
Mm-hmm. Did you, so talk about your soccer career a little bit before coaching, but did you play with that Brazilian flair? Did you have that going for you there? Your ball,
To an
like
extent.
you're a magician? Are you a magician with the
No,
ball?
no, no. I was a center back, left back. I
Okay.
could play out for sure. I wasn't as athletic as probably you needed to be. I try to use my brains and disguise and deception and those type of things. I wouldn't say I was this creative flair, number 10 or forward, but I did
Uh-huh.
okay. I did okay at center back for sure.
I'm sure you did more than okay. I have on my wall, by the way, a number 10. There's Pele up on my
Okay.
wall. One of my first books I read was, I think it was My Life in the Beautiful Game,
I love
Pele
it.
there. And his Cosmos gear, New York Cosmos. Dating myself a little bit there, Rob.
So moving to leadership, Fabrice, as we talked a little bit about, you've coached at every level. Here in Chicago at FC United, at one of the academies, you've coached at the prep schools, at professional clubs, now at the Houston Dash. What is something that goes through all those different ages? You're talking, I think you were down age 13, 14 to, multi-year vets. What is a through line that leaders can think about when they think about multiple ages leading?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, wherever you are, add value. And I would say more importantly, add outrageous value. And so regardless, so I've been an assistant, I've been a director, I've been a head coach, youth coach, like whatever you want to call it. And I think that's the first piece. The second piece is try to create an unparalleled environment. I remember even at FC United, it's like, okay, we had the new incoming of the DA. You also had threats of other clubs. You had all these things around. And I felt for me, it's like, okay, we need to create an unparalleled environment. Yes, they feel cared for, but also they feel they're in an environment where they're being challenged and they're being supported. And so meeting those people where they're at, to your point, I remember a year Georgia Rush, I'm coaching U8s, U11s, U14s, U18s all in the same year. And so like who you have to be and how you have to meet the different age groups where they're at is like really, really important. So I would say add outrageous value. I think that would be the number one thing. And then meet people where they're at in terms of that part.
I like that, outrageous value.
Well, I wrote down an outrageous value, and you also said unparalleled environment. Could you expand on that a little bit? What for you would be an unparalleled environment? That for the coaching, whether it's the level you're doing now, right, head of a professional program, which is amazing, but also kind of those lower age groups that you talked about, meeting them where they're at. So, what does an unparalleled environment look like?
So I'll start even in the FC United days because it's pertinent to this combo. We were fortunate where we had facilities and infrastructure, so it wasn't just like what Fabrice wants. We had this little indoor space with video room, and so for me, obviously, I'm like, how do we create this environment where they feel like they're getting better, a professional environment, right? So a little bit of video. I think also you always had the lure of high school season, right? Like leaving to go potentially go high school or leave to go to another club. And I felt like when I say unparalleled environment, I want what we have. Like when they come into training, it's so much different. And it's so, I don't want to sound arrogant, but like it's so far superior than anything they can experience anywhere else that it's not even a conversation whether they should come and play for us. And so that's what I mean by that. In all humility, that was always in the mindset. Like, how do we create? And that was, you have to bring your passion every day. You have to bring, you can't just like rah as well. Like you have to give real detail and insight to these players. And back to the point of adding value, like you need to add the top player value, right? You need to add the lower player value. And so I think doing that now, fast forward to where I'm at now, it's the same thing. Like when I run a passing pattern or when a head, assistant coach runs, like I want it to be the best passing pattern that they've ever experienced. Right. Or if we're doing a small sided game, it's the same thing. Like every session is so important for us to develop our players. And so, it's the same thing here. I want us to create an environment where we talk about a destination of choice that only becomes prevalent if what you create here is hopefully, And I'm not saying it is, but at least the idea behind it is far superior to what they can experience anywhere else.
Rob, just jumping real quick, just because something that Fabrice mentioned, I'm thinking about Catholic schools right now, is he's talking, program of attraction, right? Program of attraction, not getting so hung up on what others are doing, looking at our best selves, right? Be better. And then we took it, sometimes enrollment at Catholic schools, it kind of is what it is. Numbers have gone down, whatever it might be. But always, one thing you can always try is, well, get better, like be that program that is unparalleled in some way and really strive, right? And I assume that people were attracted to your program, Fabrice, because they knew that, well, I'm not going to waste my time. We're going to be doing meaningful drills here, and the team environment, right? Does that seems that way to me? That's a great lesson for Catholic school leaders as well. So
Fabrice, on that, you're in your second year at Houston. Took over a program that was not at the top of its play. I think they may have been near the bottom. How do you that culture coming in is not what we were just talking about. A lot of our school leaders, same thing. They go into a school and there's a reason there's a new president. Can you talk about changing culture, what you're doing in Houston? I mean, you finished the season just about in the playoffs, which is remarkable where it was when you took over. I think you're doubled your second half points from the time you took over. So what did you do in the middle of the season? You didn't get a whole preseason. You didn't get a build. Like, you took over a program. What did you do to change that from the little bit of research I did?
Yeah, I mean, so I did start the beginning of the season last year with the group. And so obviously we had kind of a slow start. We had to tweak through some things. We had a big mid-year review where I just looked a lot internally and just like, okay, how do I need to grow and learn through that process? And so it's taken a lot of time, but I would just say the first piece is, without vision, the people will perish. And so what I mean by that is you have to have real clarity in terms of your vision, and not only that, is you need to also, how do you bring in key stakeholders along the road of that vision? Because if you just say, hey, here's the vision, walk in it and buy into it, like, that's not going to work either. So you have to have clarity and vision. And the more you can not only make people, but actually bring people within that vision, the more, I don't like to use the word buy-in, but the more invested your stakeholders around you will be. And the other piece is, internal leadership. I think as I grew in how I led the leaders within the team, that greatly improved the overall investment from the group and the players as a whole. So those are a few key lessons I feel. And obviously, your football has to be clear, your ideas have to be clear, all those things true. But I think holistically, I would say those two things are for sure most important.
Wow. Yeah, well, that again, a lot of parallels here for leadership in schools as well. I'm going to cycle back to one of the first comments, you just made, Fabrice, is that I'm struck by your comment that when mid-season things weren't maybe going as well as you'd hoped, right? I mean, but you use that for time to step back and reflect upon yourself, right? To say, what could I be doing differently? Could you describe because that takes courage to do, right? I mean, to hold that mirror up to self, because quite frankly, a lot of times people are going to be pointing toward other things, right? If only we had this, if only we had that. But great sign, I think, of a great leader is you said, I'm going to look at myself a little bit. What was that experience like for you? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, a big guiding truth or value in my life is extreme ownership. Like, if anything goes wrong, like, it's on me first and foremost. It's not anyone else. And so that's always been my mentality wherever I've been. And so through that, I did an internal audit of myself because I knew I needed to grow and be better. The other piece, I did one of our current programs. So we looked at performance, culture, processes. Those are like the big three that we looked at. And internally, we're like, and I brought the staff in. I was like, hey, how can we improve here? Where are we at here? Like, pretty much a SWOT analysis on all those things. And so, one of the things I learned to grow in is, in the beginning, I was very much, it has to be this way and it has to be done at this manner. And I felt like as I understood my group more, the players I felt were too concerned with the rightness of it. And so they would then become slightly more passive in execution. And we all know when you're hesitating in terms of, how to execute and you're not trusting your instincts, you're not going to perform at your highest level. So I had to change a little bit, not necessarily the ideas, but how I communicate, and so I think, one of the big themes we talk about is aggressive mistakes. And so that's something that I felt like just encourage them. Hey, go be yourself, go take ownership, like go make aggressive mistakes. And so I just had to change a little bit of the delivery and the overall message and create more of a we versus like me versus them. And that takes time. Like I have to grow and I don't know what I don't know. And I had to have a lot of hard conversations with people and get some good feedback. And that's kind of how all that emerged for sure.
It's interesting, Fabrice. I remember talking to a dad of a daughter who you coached for a number of years, who I still remember him he had not seen a coach so open to growth. A lot of the club coaches this is the way it's going to be. And he was like kind of blown away at what you're talking about, that openness to your growth. So I'd say I've as long as I've known you, that's been a part of who you are. Is that like you're eating stuff up. Continuing on the leadership, do you have a leadership philosophy?
Oh, yeah. The first piece I kind of mentioned a little bit in terms of the vision. You have to have clarity of your vision. Like that has to be really just crystal clear. So like even, going into this off season, one of my big visions or work-ons was how do I become an expert in leading high performing women? Like that was something that for me, when you're in the youth setting, you actually interact more with parents sometimes than the players, because the players are there for such a small time, right? Like you interact a little bit, but it's more, you're not really with them day in and day out, right? Outside of maybe the trips and things like that. And so then when you're an assistant, you're always the good guy, like you're helping them. There's no pressure. You're not making hard decisions. Like, but now when, you're in the hot seat and you're, making all these decisions, you're not always going to be everyone's best friend, And so for me, really, that was a big clarity moment for me. I'm like, I need to become more of an expert. Like, how do I lead high performing women? So whether it's, reading Emma Hayes' books, Anson Dorance's, speaking with, people like Mark Krikorian or reading Dawn Staley's, so like those are all things, I just actually finished a book, How to Win, which was phenomenal by the performance psychologist from the England Lionesses who won the Euros. And that was like mind blown. So just, I think first and foremost is leadership philosophy is vision. Involving stakeholders, making them feel invested. So you have to take time, you have to ask questions, and it's actually through that interaction and collection of information, then you have to be very good at like deducting and actually analyzing the things in the direction that you need to go in, And so I think those are a few things that, need to have. And then the other piece is you need to have the daily discipline to execute. Like you can have the greatest vision in the world if you don't have daily discipline. And so I live a very disciplined life. And so that to me allows, I feel, to execute. And the last piece, I have to remind myself more and more and more, but sometimes I get too task oriented and I have to remember this is a people business. And so I have to put blocks in me and just like, hey, like, why am I here? What's a gratitude practice? Or, being excited or passionate about helping people grow, not so much getting the task done. So that's just a personal work on for me that I constantly want to evolve. But those are a few things in terms of leadership, of how I approach leadership where I'm at.
That's great. We're going to take a brief pause to get a word in from our sponsor.
The next class, 2.0, is proudly sponsored by Catholic Education Services and ILE, two organizations committed to supporting Catholic schools and their leaders. Catholic Education Services, formerly Catholic Virtual, partners with Catholic schools to deliver online education services, including expanding course offerings, filling teacher openings, and creating alternative learning options. Learn more at CatholicEducationServices.com. ILE, the Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship in Education, offers Catholic school leaders a unique professional community for spiritual formation, leadership development, and renewal. Discover more at ileconnect.org. That's ILEECONNECT.org. Together, we're helping Catholic schools thrive today and lead with vision for tomorrow.
We're back from hearing from our sponsor, and we're having a really wonderful interview. And Rob, I probably feel the same way I do. Is just these lessons that Fabrice is talking about in terms of his leadership approach definitely applies to leadership in our schools. Uh, Before our break, one of the things that you mentioned, Fabrice, was that you're in a people business, and earlier on in our interview, I heard you say that you really need to meet players where they were at, right? I mean, there was that going on too. Quick aside, and leads to a question about meeting players where they're at. When I was at Seattle Prep, we had a wonderful player. Her name is Sam Hyatt, Samantha Hyatt. She was on the U.S. national team, and I think she plays for Portland now. I'm not, it looks like I think you know who she is. But anyway, wonderful young woman. And so I don't even know how this started, but I think it was her freshman year. She had walked by my window, and I had an old rotten pumpkin in the window. It was a little after Halloween. And for some reason, I think it was her idea, it must not have been mine, that we decided we're going to go up to the fourth floor of this building and throw the pumpkin out the window, to smash the pumpkin. And so we did that every year, all 4 years. Sam would come to my office because I always have a rotten pumpkin there. And there's something so much fun about throwing pumpkins out a window and just watching them smash. And I don't want to read too much into this, but I kind of always was struck by the fact that I think she was on the women's national or the national team at the time and such. And this kid probably had so much pressure in her lives to do well. Great parents. So I'm not saying it came from them, that she probably needed to smash pumpkins every once in a while. And I'm just wondering, in terms of your coaching with your players, how do you weave into it? I'll call it mental health. I'll call it just joy. And maybe it means sacrificing a certain drill at a certain time in order to have some of those moments. What are your smashing pumpkin moments?
Yeah, good question. This actually came or birthed out of that mid-year review, but just kind of bringing more fun and more connection piece. So we had something we did last year called 3-minute throwback. So we just had, it started with myself. I went up there and I just shared 3 minute of a story of myself, and so we just kind of rotated that. And so we had players share stories about childhood, 18th year birthday. And so it was kind of a cool time to just be a little bit vulnerable and just kind of share a little bit about yourself. That's one thing, we've kind of done. We've done little like fun activities, whether it's like a 5-minute like connection thing just to like, loose out. I also feel like especially at this level, we tend to be so tactical. And sometimes you just need like a fun day of just play, flying changes, 4v4, like just play, like get back to just enjoying the game and not being coached so much. So it's a mixture of on-field stuff. It's a mixture of off-field stuff, but those are a few things that, to kind of let people blow off steam and just more connect and, in that regard.
Rob, just a quick follow-up to that, the comment, the game is the best teacher kind of thing. And I just was, your background from France and Brazil, do you feel like sometimes Americans are kind of overcoached in terms of it's all in the head and they're not as free will? I mean, this is kind of a little bit of the rap on American soccer for decades. I don't know if it's still that way or not, but they're sometimes too mechanical because they're not allowed the freedom to just be like in Brazil, like just go play. You know what I'm saying? Or is that maybe that's an unfair criticism?
Well, I would just say, I think the American landscape is so vast and so diverse, and you have even geographical regions that play very, like, teams in Southern California sometimes play very differently than a Midwest team, right? And I know I'm oversimplifying, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough balance because if you compare maybe to the Spanish player, right, where like there's a lot more from a young age, they understand game intelligence more. There's also a culture in Europe of watching the game a lot. Like if you take a lot of, our even national team players, or youth national team players more specifically, I'm sure they watch the game because maybe their coaches influence them. But how much of that culture, sometimes you're more watching Friday Night Lights or Big Ten football, than maybe actual soccer games. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just culturally. So I think sometimes just the understanding, but back to meeting players where they're at, it's like, let's say the game understanding isn't that, well, you have to meet them. You have to meet them where they're at. And it's like, I remember, I guess, yeah, there's a few thoughts that come to mind, but one things I've had to learn is simplify, simplify, simplify. And the more I just simplify things and just now ask for higher execution, the better this team runs, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Thank you.
Continuing that sort of leadership development thread, Fabrice, as we've said, you spent your whole career developing players at the youth level before moving to professional coaching. What's the most important thing young leaders, whether they be athletes, educators, young people, what do they need to hear that they often don't hear?
I mean, I think of two things. I think of first and foremost, like your craft and your coaching ability. So what in this regard, and yours teaching ability, right? So, I've read a lot of like one of Doug Lamotte's books, one of my favorite books, The Guide to Coaching, or The Guide to, and it's like, it's written for really actually specifically soccer coaches. But how good are you at articulating concisely, clearly, the game, or maybe it's a subject matter, whatever it is, and how do you do it where you inspire the individual to take action? So that is, you can unpack that in so many ways. It's not just the actual information. It's actually, how are you inspiring movement and action and taking people to a higher level? That's the first piece. The second piece is coachability. If you're not coachable and if you're not open to learning and feedback, you're going to stagnate and you're going to be limited to your impact. And ultimately, it's going to limit your coaching ability. So I think those are two things that really come to mind: is coaching ability. Are you fine tuning your craft all the time, right? And you can unpack that however you want. And then your coachableness, right, is really, really important.
Yeah, related to that, one of the areas that Rob and I really work a lot on in ILE, our organization, is Catholic school leadership, right? At formation. And because it's a really hard job, and you're in a really really hard job as well. I mean, the expectations that you have, and so perhaps a given leader might be focused more on just himself or herself, while there is a responsibility for the formation of the next generation of leaders, right? And so now I mean, you're in this top position in really U.S. soccer around the country. And so say, well, you've made it, right? Uh, how about those that are coming up behind you? What can you do to help them be formed as leaders? Not really talking about the X's and O's here, right? Tactical and such, but more the characteristics of leadership that you would like to see them be instilled within them.
Yeah, I would first say the position that I currently hold is for rent, and rent's due every day. I never for one second think I've arrived, and I always, maybe it's this chip on the shoulder, whatever it is, but every day I've got to, prove it, and however you want to look at it. So I just want to say that. The second piece is, and this has been an area of growth, to your point, sometimes I'm so focused, and as a youth coach, sometimes you're so focused on just your team and your individual. So you never have a staff around you, right? So that's one of the things I've had to learn and grow. And how do I lead and manage staff around me, right? So I currently have a couple assistants on staff that want to be head coaches one day, right? So like, how am I growing them, inspiring them? And so, we brought a technical director in Twyla, who's been fantastic in terms of her leadership, and I've learned so much, and she's helped me in some of the gaps that I've had in terms of those areas. But like, even this past weekend, we were able to kind of tag team individual coaches, right, and just like help them grow, like in terms of their IDP plan. So I think it's a really important part, and it's, if you're only focused on self and your own growth, which is, yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's really important, but I think it also just makes it far more meaningful, when you can help others kind of grow and lead. The next step would be, how do I impact more around? And I think for me, it's, before I do that, I want to make sure my house is in order. I want to make sure that inside these four walls, like, I'm doing the best job that I can. That's always my mentality, because I'm still, a young coach per se, like in terms of just overall head coach. So, but I think hopefully as we improve and that processes are in place, I can expand more and have more of an outreach.
Yeah, the comment you made about, I love it. You rent, it's a rent position right now. I'm my role at Eiley, I report to Rob, who's the executive director, and I feel very much that way. By the way, just want to let you know that oftentimes my conversation with Rob to start a day, Rob will start the conversation with, I've decided not to fire you today. So that's often how I actually start my day. So this isn't about me though, Rob. What questions do you
Well, I'd like to stick on that leadership development. Can you take Kent on your team as your assistant and free me of him? No, in seriousness,
that would not go very well.
If you were designing a leadership formation program for young coaches or young educators, young school leaders, what would the first module be? What's the beginning of the playbook?
Honestly, the more I'm in this is know thyself, like self-awareness. Self-awareness, the more I'm in this business, it's like we can talk about all these other things, but like how self-aware are we? Because if you don't know your gaps, you can't grow. You don't know in which areas to grow. So that would be, it could be a simple, self-starting conversations. It could be partner up with a mentor. It could be, analyze your past year, whatever it is, but self-awareness would be number one.
I totally agree. That is
we'll bring in Saint Teresa of Avila, a Spanish saint that we read a lot, Fabrice, in our seminars. But she says that the goal of life is just two things: self-knowledge and humility. And she doesn't place one in front of the other. I think like her teaching is, if you know yourself really well, you're probably going to be humble, and only through humility can you know yourself well. And so there's some great lessons, that is within that. Rob, I just have one more question. And again, it's a little bit off from the side a little bit here, Fabrice, but I was going back. I just was thinking of something that you said, you've said so many wonderful things. There was a movie a number of years ago. I think Matthew McConaughey was in it. I think it's called U-505, if I have it right. But anyway, Matthew McConaughey was the number 2 guy in a submarine, right? And so he was the buddies with all the other sailors, right? Because he's the number 2 guy. And he didn't really understand what it'd be the number 1 guy. And spoiler alert, of course, the captain dies. And so he's thrust into the role of being the number 1 guy and having to make hard decisions that cost lives, right? And so, not to say that exact equivalent here, but when you moved into this role, that's the number 1 role, particularly in the setting that you're in, which is very, very high profile. I mean, the great thing about women's soccer is just how profile it is across the country. It's amazing, right? So you're in this very high profile thing. What didn't you know before you moved into the role as the top guy, and that you learned? Are you smiling a little bit there? I hope it.
Yeah. Man, I could spend hours on this question. Yeah. I really could. I would say probably going back to the self-awareness piece, right? Like you can think you're very self-aware, but then when you're put in a different environment, there's gaps that you're not aware of, right? That kind of come up. And so I think first and foremost is, communication as a whole. Like how was I communicating? And I think sometimes perception and reality, or perception and intent, right? So my intent of communicating one way could be perceived very differently to what I intended originally. And so I have to think about my tone and how I communicate. And so I think communication, and I could unpack that for days, but how was I communicating? Was I communicating a we mentality, right? Like how was I involving everyone in decisions? So even now, like I call it leadership huddles with our leadership group. So like, the 4 or 5 leaders within our team will huddle up like every week, just connect, like wins, work-ons, forecasts, like just simple things, but just keeping the touch point, because the more you separate, the more things can kind of, people can come up with different ideas and like, oh, what's happening here, and like kind of make up things potentially. Yeah. So I think the more you can communicate and how you communicate has been one of the biggest things I've done.
Yeah, when those voids are there in communication, the gap's going to get filled somehow, and not always in great ways, right? All of a sudden now the narrative changes and didn't even see that coming. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for that. Rob?
Well, Fabrice, we're going to close it out here with 3 rapid fire questions that are kind of fun for our listeners. So the first, best leadership book you have ever read?
Man, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Think about the people we talked about today, future leaders, future coaches. What's something that they should be reading for an aspiring leader?
Yeah, so I would say from a spiritual standpoint, Spiritual Leadership by J. Wald Sanders. That was a game-changing book that I've read. When it comes to, man, I think of a few. Extreme Ownership, by Jocko Willink. Like, I think that, as simple as that sounds, but like, something's, it's, I think he has a quote, something along the lines is, pretty much like bad teams are a result of bad leaders. That's literally what, he talks about. And I think it's always pointing at yourself and like, how do you need to grow and learn? And I think that's a book. I would say it's pretty foundational in terms of that. I would say if you want to really hone in on your craft, The Guide to Coaching by Doug Lamov is very good when it comes to that. So sorry, I gave you like three, but anyways.
Oh, and the one Doug Lamov, I think, would really translate to teaching. What's something, speaking of a teacher, a great teacher and a great coach always have in common?
I think I'd go back to the two things I said about coaching ability and coachable, right? So I think how well do you teach, and not only like you teach, but how well do people not only take in the information but are inspired by the information, and actually, how can you take, I remember I had a US history professor that just made it very exciting. Like, he just found a way to just make it very exciting. And I wasn't a big history guy at all, but I was like, at least like, I felt like I was learning something. This was exciting, So, yeah. And then the ability to be coachable. Like, you have to constantly seek feedback, from different stakeholders around you.
Great. And our final question we ask every guest on the podcast: who was your greatest teacher and why?
I had two. So one was in college. What I liked about this teacher is he didn't want you to think like the masses. He wanted you to really understand why do you believe what you believe. Don't just believe something because your parents told you. Don't just believe something because your institution told you. Like, why do you believe what you believe? And I just always remember him saying that. And he had this one line that always resonated with me: readers are leaders, leaders are readers. Like, he would always repeat that constantly. I was like, man,
great line.
good. So I would say that one. And then a personal, just other coach. He's actually in Southern California. His name's Esteban, but he really taught me how to coach. And I would say even coach on the women's side really well. Like, a lot of my philosophies and how I coach have really kind of stemmed from just watching him daily back then. So
that's
awesome.
Great. Well, Fabrice, thank you for taking time out of your preseason. We hope you and the Dash have a great season. I think you're going to get some new Houston Dash fans out of this ILE podcast.
Yeah, you betcha.
And just appreciate the time.
When do you guys come up to play here in Seattle? Are you coming up here? What's going on?
Oh gosh, we are. Do you know the date? We'll pull that up for you in a second.
I'll look it up myself. But
yeah.
Head off for that
but we do play up there.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I'll get my Houston jersey. I don't have it yet. I'll have my Houston jersey on. Do they come in XXX size? Because I got to find one of those. But okay, so all right.
August 30th. So
all right. Okay. I'm going to mark it on the calendar.
And also, and the Chicago Stars at the new stadium at the lakefront, Fabrice.
That'll be exciting. We're going to play, I think, in October, so I'm sure that'll be a windy matchup.
I looked at it. I think, unfortunately, we have a conflict.
Clearly, a wonderful coach. The best coaches are the best people, right? They're just really, really caring and thoughtful people. What a blessing you are, Fabrice, and what a blessing it was for us to have you on. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the time. I love the questions. Sometimes you don't get asked these questions and really reflect kind of on leadership. So it's been a time to just take away from the busyness of everything, and I really appreciate the dialogue. So
it's great. Wow, Kent, that was a lot of fun.
It was really good, and I just feel like there were so many areas that Fabrice got into in terms of leadership that it's going to take a little while to distill it, right? But I noticed that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about his resume or results and such, and rather we talked more about the personal qualities that he has, and that and as you mentioned, his commitment to growth, his own personal growth, as just a key to his success. Really impressive person. I'm sure he's a really impressive coach as well.
Yeah, amazing. As I said at the beginning, one of the best. I also was struck by the readers are leaders, leaders are readers,
Yeah.
and the number of books he was just
Yes.
piping off like that.
Yes.
Clear that he is somebody open to growth and yearning to grow as a leader, as a person. And I didn't write it down. What was that thing right at the beginning? What you got to bring to the job? Outstanding value or
Outrageous value. Outrageous value, and related to that, a culture of destination. And I assume they're intertwined with each other. Yeah, I love that phrase, outrageous value. So what's if it's given schools, it's open house and you're the head of the school and you have to give a talk. What's your outrageous value that you bring? And your outrageous value might be, we are so centered on the person. We are so centered on care. We believe every child is made in the image of God, whatever it might be. But those are outrageous statements, right? Because they're outrageous values. And that's what he premises his whole leadership approach on. He creates a culture of destination because of his emphasis on outrageous values. Great stuff.
I think we at Eiley should adopt the Houston Dash this year.
Yes.
As our team. And just fun to follow and watch what happens.
Let's do this. And just again, think of the swag potential for us, Rob, if we were to do that. Let's get a hold of their marketing department, and we're all in. We're all in on the Houston Dash. So
we are. So to our listeners, once again, thank you for joining us. And we hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Fabrice, transferring leadership lessons from the pitch to the classroom.
Ooh.
Like us on social media and share this with your friends. We'll see you on the next class.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in.